Monday, March 1st, 1976. I sat in a cold courtroom in Salt Lake City next to Ted Bundy's parents. It was snowing outside. Ted sat at the defense table with his attorneys, waiting for the judge to return with the verdict. I stared at the back of Ted's head, my mind filled with memories of things we had gone through together for the past 6 years. Ted Bundy was on trial for the attempted kidnapping of a young woman, Carol Duranche, from a suburban shopping mall near Salt Lake City. She identified Ted as the man who, posing as a police officer, had lured her into his Volkswagen, handcuffed her, and tried to crush her head with a crowbar. Her attempted abduction had been linked to the disappearances and murders of several young women in the Salt Lake City area. And the Salt Lake murders were linked to 8 murders of young women in the Seattle area during the first 7 months of 1974. Ted and I met in Seattle in October 1969, became lovers, and continued an intense relationship until September 1974, when he moved to Salt Lake City. Even now, a year and a half later, we were far from finished with each other. Since the summer of 1974, I had been tormented by fears that Ted was involved in the murders in the Seattle area. Finally, I had gone to the King County Police with my suspicions. They told me they had checked Ted out and eliminated him as a suspect. But I continued to worry. And in January 1975, I talked to the police in Salt Lake City. They also told me he was clear. Now I knew that I had been terribly mistaken, that my Ted could not be guilty of these horrible crimes, but that I had set in motion machinery of the law that could crush out his life. Judge Stuart Hansen entered, and we all stood. There seemed to be no air in the room. I find the defendant, Theodore Robert Bundy, guilty of aggravated kidnapping, a first-degree felony. Ted's attorney asked that Ted be allowed some time with his family. We entered the judge's chamber, where Ted was frisked and his hands cuffed behind his back. I put my arms around him and told him I was sorry. He was drenched with sweat and stiff with tension. I kissed him on the cheek and whispered, "I love you." I hated myself for what I had done to him. In July 1979, I watched Ted again as another verdict was read. This time the trial was in Florida, and I was seeing it on TV. This time I was sure that Ted was guilty as charged, guilty of raping and beating to death 2 young women as they slept in their Florida State University sorority house, and of severely beating 3 others. I knew he was guilty because of what he had told me in a 2 a.m. telephone call in February, just after he was captured in Florida. The Florida prosecutors had visited me in Seattle and asked me to testify against Ted. I had at first agreed, but the more I thought about it, the more reluctant I became. I still cared about him very much, and I had worked very hard at putting my life back together. I was sure the defense could make mincemeat of my testimony, and of me. I had never been named in the press, and I valued my anonymity. My sex life with Ted would be a subject of great interest, as it had been to all the investigating police officers. I was a recovering alcoholic, had not had a drink in 3 years, but people would only hear the word alcoholic. The prosecutors had told me my testimony was vital and that they would protect me from attacks by Ted's lawyers, but I reminded them that in our 2 a.m. phone conversation, Ted had specifically refused to talk to me about the crimes in Florida. He was trying to arrange things so that he could be returned to a prison in Washington State and be near his family and friends. I asked the prosecutors why they didn't bargain with Ted, offer him this in exchange for answers to questions about the murders of young women in Washington, Oregon, Utah, and Colorado.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.